Hello everyone, and welcome to the Pancake Parlay, episode 103. I'm your host, The Don, and I'm here with Chatters. How are you today?
I'm good, Don. How are you?
I'm good. We are the Pancake Parlay podcast where we talk about movies, TV shows, games, pop culture stuff every single week. So let's just get into the news. And basically, the virus has taken another victim, another event, you would say, yeah?
Yeah, BlizzCon got delayed. It was supposed to happen, I think, it was originally supposed to happen in April, but then it got delayed to November. But I think now it's just completely gotten cancelled. And yeah, Blizzard obviously put this up on their official website about it being cancelled, and it's kind of a big deal because Blizzard actually makes a lot of money from this bad boy. There's a lot of tournaments going on, a lot of goodies. Like you can watch this as like a digital event at home and get like a bunch of stuff. Like if you play Diablo, if you play Hearthstone like myself, you get some cool little like extra stuff if you buy like a digital ticket. I've never done it because I don't really care too much about like card backs, which is usually what you get from Hearthstone. But people who love the tournament side of things, watching Dota and stuff like that, they're all missing out. And yeah, unfortunately, it's again a consequence of the virus and how that's all been affecting everything.
Funny how Blizzard protects China last year with the free Hong Kong thing, and then this year it's like because of China
God
you
damn
don't
it.
get your money.
Yeah,
It's kind of like karma.
Yeah, there is a lot of funny irony in that. So yeah, I mean that's the state of things being cancelled. And the latest victim, I guess, everything's like, I guess around the world, like things are kind of slowly like opening up again. Like here in Australia, they're allowing more people to go out and stuff. So maybe we might be seeing a return of normalcy when it comes to like events and stuff, but I think it'll still be quite a while in terms of having like something like a giant conference or a big con event like BlizzCon.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm assuming if they can't risk people getting it, or if they do, there might be people like at some point someone's going to be like, oh yeah, we're going to sue you for getting it or killing someone or whatever it is.
Yeah, like being irresponsible. Yeah, it's a classic. Like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks because I mean, I was actually considering, like, it's been a while since I've been to a con. I was actually considering like, oh, maybe I'll actually go to something to see her.
I guess not,
Probably,
and
I guess not.
you're definitely not going to go to PAX or anything like that. That's not happening.
Yeah,
And
no, definitely.
I feel like a lot of that space they're moving all that stuff to like digital passes or something like that, where I guess they're showcasing stuff online, or yeah, that's the only way they could really do it.
Well, but it also just sucks because a lot of kind of creatives aren't able to kind of show off their work as well. Like there's lots of people who sell stuff and sell their paintings and things like that. So I don't know, it sucks, but hey, that's the state of things. Speaking of things that have been delayed and cancelled, Star Wars, the High Republic. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. It's essentially Disney's new publishing initiative, which is like the state of the Jedi about, I think, 400 years before the not the old sorry, not the old Republic, like when Episode 1 begins. It's set 400 years before then. And it's about like kind of a era of exploration and people kind of like the Jedi kind of exploring the galaxy, and it's supposed to have like a air of like, I guess, newness about it. This has currently been delayed, unfortunately, and it's been delayed till January 2021. So
This was like originally this is supposed to be like what, a novel book thing or like a whole media thing, right?
yeah, so it's essentially supposed to be like the new kind of era in the Star Wars universe that they were going to set stories about. Because again, this is a quote unquote period that hasn't been explored. Because usually, like when you think Star Wars, you either think the the current kind of line of things where it's like episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Disney, and then in the Lucas, I guess the George Lucas film era, like and just kind of like, I guess, Lucas's kind of conglomerate of Star Wars novels and stuff. Like they used to explore things in the past, such as like the Old Republic. That was that era. That was like ages ago. Or you would settle on things that are set like after Episode 6. Now they tried to do that with, uh, with what is it, the new Disney Star Wars stuff, and that obviously failed. And nobody's been reading the books, nobody's been buying the toys. Heaps of like kind of like sellers of toys are like, yeah, nobody's buying, uh, Ray toys or Rose Tico toys or whatever they may be. So they're
All
kind
those
of going
random
back
characters that so iconic, right?
yeah, iconically bad, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
what you could definitely call them. But yeah, like so they're kind of going back to the kind of tried and true method of kind of just making toys about people, stuff people care about. And so because Disney's kind of fucked it with uh, the new Star Wars era, they're kind of going back and like, hey, where can we go and start fresh? Okay, let's do the High Republic and just talk about the I guess the expansion of Jedi's around the galaxy, which isn't a bad idea. But you see, my I'm not a professional, but my opinion would be, you should have just done this and just set it after Episode 9, and just said that Rey reestablishes the Jedi Order again, and it's 400 years after the events of Episode 9. And now they're sending Jedi's off everywhere and trying to explore things. Like that would have been far more better. But again, they're just like kind of banking on, because the problem is now, it doesn't matter what they do in the High Republic. Everything has to end again and end in the timeline that will lead into Episode 1, and then subsequently Episode 6, and then subsequently Episode 9.
Yeah, so like, it's one of those things where it's like we're gonna know about these characters, but will they matter in the long run? Probably not. Like in the
No,
grand scheme of things,
realistically, no.
like I do hope that obviously they give us good characters and then characters that we can relate to, and then we're just like, oh yeah, and then this character kind of like dies, for example, or like it's drama and these character moments are just by itself in a sense. Like it doesn't need to relate to the Skywalkers, it doesn't need to relate to the bigger things. I think, like, I feel like that's a lot of the problem of all this stuff, is that it always relates back to the grander story, whilst the universe is all, it's like a living thing. It's a living, breathing world. And they should have things that are like, it could just focus on the Jedi and not have this like foreshadowing of like events to happen. It could just be its self-contained thing. And I think I hope they do something like that, because even in something like the Clone Wars, which is kind of always it's such a big event that it relates to it. At least it kind of had its own individual things. But now that we see its success as well as the Mandalorian success, we've kind of seen a lot of these characters being like, yeah, we're going to shove all these characters now into the Mandalorian. And I think like,
Yeah.
and it's kind of one of those, that's kind of fine. But if Mandalorian's like, oh, well, this is also related to like, Rey's journey now and all the modern things, that's when I'll kind of get a little bit annoyed, where it's like, you're relating things too much onto other things. Like Star Wars is such an amazing IP with amazing characters. It's okay if the High Republic people have nothing got to do with any of the main movies or anyone related to anything, and that's my hope. Like they're not there to change the world. They're not there to, it's just about like what the Jedi would have been like 400 years before we first saw them. That's all I really want. I don't want this to be like,
well,
them being like, oh, there's this sacred text that says there's gonna be a sacred one, and it's like, I don't need that. Like
well,
too many foreshadowing.
They're probably going to foreshadow stuff like that for sure. But I think it is going to be more like, oh, hey, we're going to have these new characters explore these worlds, these unknown worlds, like, ooh, Tatooine. What is Tatooine, right? Like, and it's going to be like humans or aliens or whatever these people, Jedi's are, like their first encounter with this planet or this race or this thing. And I don't know, like I think they're very restricted just because, well, they can't really introduce really new worlds, even though they did in Episode 9 and stuff. But it's like they can't really without like kind of retconning too much, because like the universe has already been established. But again, like that probably won't stop Disney from making up new shit.
Remember, canon doesn't exist, so.
Yeah, that's right. That dude said that, didn't he? The guy, I think the creative writer of the Lucas project. But yeah, like and there's all these kind of rumors about like, oh, maybe Sabine might be like the identity of uh the Mandalorian in the next season as well. There was like a bit of rumors like that I heard. Again, I actually don't think that this will necessarily be true, unless it's like one of those kind of bait and switch stuff that maybe Kathleen Kennedy would be meddling with, right? Like it's essentially like from the playbook of Episode 7, right? Like everybody thought Finn was going to be the Jedi, even though I didn't. But then it ended up being Rey, which is what I predicted was the case. It was going to be a huge bait and switch.
Or it could have just been both,
No. It wasn't.
just a solid note.
Because they didn't really do anything with John Boyega's character until the very end, where
they're just like, oh yeah, we're gonna shove in this detail of like he has a secret or whatever, and then apparently they cut all that stuff out anyway. So,
and to be fair, they did a very similar thing in Solo, a Star Wars story, right? Like they had I think the hunter or the pirate or something. This big muscular kind of pirate ended up being like this tiny redhead chick, I think, in the end. And it's like,
oh yeah, like everyone's like, oh cool, like random bounty hunter thing, and then it's like, okay, like random little girl.
Yeah, I think like again, it's one of those things that was supposed to subvert your expectations, and you think it's a guy, but it's a girl. But like the girl didn't look very menacing, and completely changed. Like they killed people like back and front, like throughout that whole movie, and then she ended up being like a really kind like person trying to help him out at the end.
Which is so random. Like I almost feel like the trope of the subverting expectation of like, oh bam, it's a girl, or you don't expect who it is. That trope is like pretty much already done too much already. Like I almost feel like when it comes to tropes, you should like it is obviously a cultural thing and also a trend thing. I feel like it since it's already been done so much for like the past 10 years or so. I feel like to go against the trend, you should like the reveal will be, oh, it's an actual dude or something that. Like, it basically goes back to where it was before, where it's like because now every time I see something where it's like a mystery, I'm like, okay, they're gonna pull this. Like it's not doing anything interesting anymore.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I mentioned this maybe, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but yeah, like it seems to be this trend of subversion of characters is kind of motivating a desire to see kind of stories be played out in a kind of generic way almost, but like almost like a paint by numbers way, but like one example would be something like obviously this is like in Japanese media, but like Demon Slayer, the main character in that is a wholesome, like almost like goody two shoes, like almost to the point of like you couldn't believe a character like this would exist, but the character is really well developed and well written, and very wholesome that you kind of don't think he is like a typical generic anime character who's like, oh, I'm just gonna scream really hard and beat the boss by.
Yeah. And of course, like he's not the it's one of those things where it's like obviously the stereotype trope of like the chosen shonen guy, obviously like he's way different. I think he's more affectionate and more caring than most for the main guy in Demon Slayer. But yeah, I've seen that a little bit more, and I've seen more. It's just like I just want a good action film where like the bad guys are bad guys and the good guys are kind of good guys. Even something I showed that I talk about and I really love is Cobra Kai. Obviously that does a little bit more of playing on things of like who is really the bad guy. But still, that is very much traditional, like kind of like it brings back the genre of like 80s type films of like these two, like a Mighty Ducks type of feel, where it's like, oh yeah, we're the underdogs and we're gonna win, but they're framing it such a way where they're both underdogs, and it's kind of up to you to choose which, I guess, side of the dojo you're basically on. But it's that storied thing where it's like it's kind of, I guess, generic drama, they're gonna force these things, but you don't see that anymore. That it stands out more than it would if it was in the time period where it was just everywhere. And I think hopefully we'll get to that point where I think now people are going to be like, you know what, that what we had, maybe 20 years ago, I kind of want that back. And that's what people want.
Yeah, I know. I think you're completely desire for people to kind of enjoy things the like a quote unquote like way that people expect things to be, right? There's just a desire to not have your I guess expectations subverted just because we've had it happen so much that it's just kind of whatever now.
Like it's not going to reveal you. It's not like, oh my god, you surprised me. It's like
Yeah.
and I think that's, and you come into a different generation, and then when they grow up with things and how they act differently to it now, where it's like if you did introduce it, it would be different. That's why I'm for example, like comedies in the past, like I like comedies is such a weird genre, for films and things like that. But I feel like in general, like comedy films have been kind of generically the same for the past like 5 to 10 years, and they kind of keep it in this particular way. And I like comedy is a very good barometer for things differently changing. But it's like it almost feels like it's very obvious of what's going to happen. Now I almost feel like you could bring like the very like offensive, maybe very like crude humor to what it maybe was in like the late 80s, early 90s, for films, and then that would be something way different, and it would be the perfect time to actually do something like that, because everything else is playing by this tune. You're coming out left field with this tune, and everyone's like, oh, this is interesting comedy that I haven't seen in years. And I think like basically what I'm trying to get to is like all these genres and all these types of media, we just want our, I guess, traditional characters back, and traditional ways of doing it, and then we'll probably get sick of it in like the next 10 to 15 years, and we'll go back the other way, and it'll be kind of a back and forth. I think that's kind of what's going to happen. Essentially we're kind of done with having different takes on these characters, that we that we want, or different takes on genre.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us into actually the next story, is that Henry Cavill is apparently in talks in returning as Superman.
He's still our Superman, sort of. Yet.
Kind of. Yes, exactly.
We'll wait more, like, I don't know, like, let's hope when we get the official one, we'll know. But
yeah,
this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, when we confirmed that Man of Steel 2, which, man, is like, when did Man of Steel first come
Man of Steel,
out?
the first one came out in 2013. So
Yeah,
it's literally been 7 years, and we haven't got a Superman sequel. Now, of course, we've seen Superman in other media. I wouldn't call it Justice League. He's in that, not really. Like, unless obviously in the Snyder Cut we'll find some more stuff out with that one. But yeah, Batman v Superman, I think you got more of a story arc with him, because obviously you got to him to be like, oh yeah, I want to defend humanity, but humans hate me. I think that's part of his character growth in that film. But yeah, we never got a proper true sequel to Man of Steel, which is just gonna, like, because in Man of Steel you can say you never really got to see Superman because still learning to his powers. It's his origin story, but you never saw him finally have all his powers and finally figuring out what to do.
Well, here's the thing, like, a lot of the kind of changes apparently that happened in Justice League, including Superman's kind of positive outlook, apparently, came from, like, Warner Brothers, like, kind of quote unquote meddling with the film and having Joss Whedon come in and fix it up, quote unquote fix it up. With the Snyder Cut, we may be seeing his kind of view on how things are supposed to look like, and maybe from then we can see whether there is going to be like a Man of Steel 2, or is it just going to be a Superman movie or something like that, right? I guess we'll just have to confirm whether or not Henry Cavill is officially confirmed as Superman. I mean, we like look. I mentioned before that, like, apparently, like, part of the reason why Henry Cavill wasn't playing ball with Warner Brothers, like, he was supposed to do like a guest spot on Shazam, but he didn't like make the time to go, and that, like, obviously left a black mark, and people, and obviously, yeah, Warner Brothers kind of didn't want him to come back, but obviously they wanted The Rock to be Shazam, and The Rock's ex-wife is his manager, and also the manager of Henry Cavill. So it's one of those things that, like, yeah, you kind of, if they want to work in this timeline that they have for the DC universe, they got to play ball, for the most part. But at the same time, if anybody has been playing chicken the most, it's DC, because like we saw with Snyder's what is it? The uh,
the
the Watching.
yeah.
Um, Henry Cavill came back on that, and now he's playing ball again, right? The one thing that I'm kind of looking forward to is seeing them fix up certain scenes. For example, like maybe they might redo that scene where like what is it for how you can the what the mustache gate or whatever with the really badly CGI mustache. Maybe they might be able to get Henry Cavill to like either redo that scene or do like a similar but different scene so they can just kind of get rid of that altogether. Because man, like I don't even remember that being a problem in the movie. But I mean, that might just be like me not paying attention to his CGI like top lip or whatever.
I think screenshots came out and then people really hated on it, and then obviously they had a still frame of it. I think,
Yeah,
and I
the
guess
still frame.
that still frame is ingrained in your mind. And obviously, when you look at something that's paused, it looks a lot different. But
Mhm.
I didn't think it was that bad. I think just people obviously blew out of proportion because that's what the internet does.
Mhm.
But yeah, obviously you could do reshoots for it. And obviously maybe other characters will come back, but apparently there's a lot of
Well,
content out there. And there's a lot
well,
of
yeah,
content
Dark
that
Side.
has been shot.
Yeah, like Zack Snyder showed off like a colored image for Dark Side as well. So he was supposed to be like the so not whatchamacallit, the I forget what the dude Steppenwolf,
Steppenwolf,
not
what?
Steppenwolf. It was Dark Side, and Dark Side taking on all these like legions of people, um, and not him, which makes sense. It makes much more sense that it's Dark Side who tried to take over the world and not and not
Steppenwolf,
Seven.
which I'm assuming, yeah, it was like for all the rumors that I've heard, it's essentially because of the vision. Essentially, it's like that was supposed to be that way, and then when Joss Whedon came in, it's like, okay, we're gonna scale everything back. Like
Yeah.
we're gonna take away I guess dark side kind of reveal. There's even stuff where people said in there isn't that trailer where Alfred says, oh, it's about time you came, and there's a green glow. Everyone speculated that was
Hmm.
supposed to be a Green Lantern. There's all this extra stuff that's kind of been cut out. But yeah, back to I guess the Henry Cavill point. It is very interesting that like hopefully we get a confirmation that he is still Superman. And the real question is, yeah, if we're gonna get a full proper Man of Steel 2, maybe they're gonna do Superman versus Black Adam. That might happen because it's The Rock. Because essentially the whole thing, especially with DC and where it is right now, is aside from like Wonder Woman and Aquaman that have their own sequels, and Suicide Squad is kind of in its semi odd universe. It doesn't have to 100% relate. Like
Hmm.
whatever this, if there is a new like Man of Steel 2, where is it? I guess in the timeline, is it going to go before or after? Well, will this kind of
But
movie almost like retcon, almost before Justice League or after Justice League or whatever it is,
mhm.
to give the character more flesh, and then like, are they going to continue on with this? Because obviously they struck gold with something like Aquaman, Wonder Woman's casting. Henry Cavill's casting is pretty damn good. Flash is very iffy. Cyborg, that's probably we're never gonna see him ever do anything. Um,
It's
but
a
yeah,
shame
the
because
real thing is where are they moving on with this?
well, here's the thing. I think it will all be basically contingent on how well the Snyder Cut does, because I think obviously essentially HBO and Warner Brothers and stuff are owned by AT&T. That's like the big kind of cable provider slash I guess phone company in mobile provider in America. They're the ones who um, like kind of greenlit the Snyder Cut because they see it as, oh, this is something that we can put on HBO to be our like Mandalorian, you know. And that's why they kind of wanted, like, that's why it's potentially coming out in a 6 episode like kind of arc, as opposed to like a big 4 hour movie. And look, and in the end, like, and the thing is, it's really funny, and I'll get to it later. A lot of like I guess critics are like kind of against the Snyder Cut and stuff like that, which I find really funny. But in the end, I think what they'll do going forward will be contingent on how successful it is, because there's even rumors of even what is it, Batman potentially coming back, like Ben Affleck coming back and doing a scene with Deathstroke. Like that's apparently something that might happen. So
Yeah, because what was it? The original intent was you know, I think when Ben Affleck was supposed to like write/direct the Batman movie, I think it was going to be like, yeah, it was going to be Batman versus kind of Deathstroke, and that was kind of going to be the original, I think, intent of that. Because I think when there was that test screening of Deathstroke, that was, I think, was like kind of, it was for Justice League, but I think it was I don't know. Everyone looked like, I think Ben Affleck leaked it or something like that. I don't remember. I just remember, yeah, it was something got to do with
Someone leaked it.
Batman and Ben Affleck. And that would have been really cool, because then you could actually see people who, you know, don't have powers but have, I guess, like, you know, good
A fight,
martial arts
yeah,
skills
like, yeah.
and fighting skills go up against each other, which, you know, I haven't seen in any type of superhero film, pretty much. It'd be really cool to kind of see that. And yeah, it's just kind of, it would be interesting if Ben Affleck came back. I don't know if he would. Maybe we'll do it for a little bit of reshoots, because he seems to be kind of chill. You know, I think he puts on a demeanor that he's like very serious, but I feel like, you know, I feel like Ben Affleck's kind of whatever. I think the problem with the Batman character is that I think maybe it just reminds him of his divorce, because that's why he was so damn depressed all the damn time.
Well,
And that,
here's the thing. Like, I think all the reshooting and stuff that they did in Justice League was Ben Affleck during that time when he had that divorce and stuff happening. All the stuff that was filmed before the divorce was during like Zack Snyder's cut of the movie. So maybe we might get like a more confident or more like darker, more like, I guess, edgier Batman, and it might be cooler. The thing is, according to rumors, and this is according to a website called The Cultured Nerd, like sources from them are saying that it's apparently AT&T and Warner Media that want Ben Affleck to return as Batman. So maybe, you know, with the return of with the return of Henry Cavill, we might get the return of Ben Affleck. And so, you know, the kind of Batman movie that's being done at the moment, you know, is going to be in its own universe, and this is going to be its own thing too. I'm totally okay with that. Like, if it just means that they can kind of chill out and maybe even make two movies at the same time that are Batman focused, like, who cares? Like, that sounds pretty cool to me. Like, I guess it might confuse quote unquote the average audience. It's like, oh, like, you know, because we're so used to how you know, the Marvel films all kind of link up together and combine. You know, oh, it's going to confuse me because is that Batman? No, it isn't. It's two different Batman. Simple as that.
I feel like, I don't know. I feel like there obviously will have that kind of conversation for certain people, but when people realize like, oh, it's something different, then it's okay. I think Joker kind of, that Joker film that came out last year kind of broke down a lot of that type of talk, where it's like, okay, where's this? It's like, okay,
Yeah,
technically this is something's different by itself. Like, I feel like that
sure, but
obviously there'll be, every single movie will have, like, in a DC film will be like, they'll have a talk being like, where is this set? I don't know. But like, I feel like DC's plan right now is not in the DCEU, in the sense of like, everything that we make is going to be 100% related to this.
no,
Obviously they can have spin-offs, and yeah, and I feel like it's better for them. I've always
sure,
thought that way.
but I think the thing is they still want them to have their own kind of Marvel style extended universe. The problem is, like, yeah, like, you know, for every time they do well, like with like a Joker or something, they've done bad with you know, Suicide Squad, or, you know, what, like, all right, for example, like, you know, going down the list of movies, you know, we won't include Man of Steel because that's like a contentious one, like people either like it or don't like it. um you know, same thing with Batman, you know,
Batman v Superman. Yeah.
like, as much as people try and say that it is contentious, like, yeah, like, sorry, that it is a bad film, like, no, it isn't a film. But like, okay, we can start with it. Suicide Squad, bad. Wonder Woman, good. Justice League, bad. Aquaman, good. Shazam, good. Birds of Prey, bad, right? Like, so they're kind of like, okay, they're kind of doing well, and then every odd one is bad. Like, you can't you can't, you know, say that as much for like the Marvel films. Like, even their average ones are still kind of passable as a film.
Yeah, it's like a 3 stars. It did its job type of
Yeah, it did
film.
it. Yeah, it did a job thing, right? Like, you know, I'm kind of hoping that Wonder Woman 1984 is good, and the new Suicide Squad, and hopefully the new Batman movie, right? Like, that's hopefully
I
good,
know.
and
The
they're all
more
kind
I hear about the new Batman movie, the more I worry. Like, you know,
of.
going back to that point of subverting expectations, I feel like that new Batman film is going to be one of those things where it's a Batman coming out of left field, and it's going to be non-traditional, but it's going to be like, I don't know, it's going to be very different. Like I think that it's very odd because, like, for example, like Man of Steel is a very untraditional Superman film. I think everyone had a lot of crap going into it, being like, this is not my Superman. He's more depressed. He's kind of like Batman almost. But it kind of, for me, it worked. But I feel like with whatever the new Batman film's going to be, from what I don't know, from what I gather from like the tone of voice that I kind of hear from it,
Hmm.
it sounds like it's going to be completely like different. But I am not quite sure if that will sit. If it's a maybe, if it, maybe for example, if it is like a one-off like a Joker, I'd be
Yeah,
more than happy to kind of watch it like that
I
way.
think I think it's more likely to be something like that. Like it's going to be its own kind of long Halloween, or it's going to be its like detective focused thing. I don't think it's going to necessarily, yeah, unless it is really really good. It's not going to result in necessarily sequels. I think it'll probably just do good,
Yeah.
not bad. Oh, actually, I don't know.
Well, that's
Until
it.
I see more
We
of the
barely know anything that we don't really know
yeah,
anything
I don't
about.
know. I'm trying to do more hot takes, all right? I'm trying to do more guesses and then retroactively claim I was right. For this I can't. I have to see more. Like, I don't mind what the bat suit looks like. It's just I have to see it in action and see it after it's been CG'd to make what's its face look more buff looking, you know.
And
I'm
I
I'm
think that's the question as well, because obviously, I guess like Warner Brothers has a pretty bad track record, but as you were saying, like AT&T or whatever it was, and Warner Media are actually doing pretty good when it comes to, I guess, fans and what people actually want to
well, yeah.
see. So I guess the real question is, like, when it would, like, who like, because I think there's the whole thing comes down to like responsibility and who's responsible in these things. Like, whoever greenlit Joker, yeah, that's cool because it was a small budget R-rated film, and
I think that's
yeah,
yeah, sorry, no go.
and kind of blew people's things away. So my question is, with the Batman thing, will they, like, will the studio heads do and interfere what they did with Justice League and be like, I don't know, fans want to do this, so you have to make it this way and that way. Like, what I'm basically trying to say is, do you think studios, the Warner Brothers studios or AT&T will be like, no, you can't have a Batman film that has X. You need to do this. Like, do you
Look,
feel like they'll interfere?
look, unfortunately, it seems to be a very consistent thing within DC that they just want to have like one like every time we start thinking, oh, maybe this is when they'll let up and have multiple Supermans or multiple Batman. Like they kind of don't. Now we're kind of getting to that point because there's like the Superman and Lois Lane TV show coming out. Obviously Henry Cavill's Superman. So we're kind of having multiple people, but I think that'll still be something that holds back, their universe because they're not allowed. Like, like we had the Flash, but the Flash isn't as big as a character from a mainstream perspective as, let's say, Batman, right?
Mm-hmm.
They won't even necessarily have like Batman in Batwoman even. The finale kind of hints at, ooh, like they're going to be the return of Bruce Wayne, but it's not going to be actually Bruce Wayne. So like it's cop outs in the end. Because like there is some kind of agreement where they can't have, the character be Batman. Because otherwise, like Gotham should have just been a show about Batman. It would have been way better, as a show altogether. Because even though like in Gotham they recreated a lot of events, a lot of storylines from the comics, anyways. So it just seems like a bit of a a
It's like,
loss
just
in the end
why?
there. I think the thing is AT&T does seem to be trying to appease the fans and try and make things that people actually want to watch. Like people want to watch the Snyder Cut, right? People want to see, hey, what was the original version of that? Okay, there's all right, we better try and fund it and release it. And the thing is, it's really strange because you see like a bunch of other media outlets, like Screen Rant, Collider, Vulture, all these places are all talking about how the like they shouldn't be making the Snyder's Cut, or it's like a mistake to make it. Like for example, like the Vulture article is literally called like "Why Hath the Snyder Cut Released?" and it's just basically a bunch of drivel about, oh well, they shouldn't capitulate to like the bullying of fans, and even like trying to connect it with like modern politics. Like it's
Wait,
so
yeah,
it's
that's really weird because even like, for example, like the Snyder Cut movement is far off that entirely, because like there's so much things of, for example, like, they've raised money for charities and things like that. They've done a lot of good stuff. And it's so weird to kind of see that as bullying. And I feel like it's a very odd thing, because it's kind of like,
I think you have to...
critics can have a voice, but people who actually consume the media, that actually pay for it, the people who you're supposed to have, your target demographic, shouldn't have a voice. It's very weird.
No, because they don't, because they see it as okay, so here's the thing. They want to present it as, oh well, the fans are being toxic, and they're basically like holding cinemas and establishments to, like, at gunpoint in releasing this stuff, and that it's unhealthy, and they shouldn't, it's like, you shouldn't negotiate with terrorists, kind of thing, right? Like, for example, Collider's article is called "Why Releasing the Justice League Snyder Cut Sets a Bad Precedent," right? Like, it's gonna result in, like, riots on the street, and people robbing from their mothers and shit. Screen Rant's one is literally called "Justice League Snyder's Snyder's Cut sets a bad precedent." Like, all these outlets, and it's not just these. I've seen some other ones as well, where people are just trying to build like a narrative that, nobody really, like, I remember, like, back when people were talking about the Snyder Cut, all these outlets were trying to talk about how, nobody actually really wants this, right? Like,
no one wants it. It doesn't exist. Stop talking about it. It's like,
you don't want this person who's reading this article. I
know better, because I'm a critic. What does that even mean? I don't know.
Well, it's because, look, in the end, like, critics just want to gatekeep, whatever it may be, whether video games, comic books, video games. Did I already mention video games?
Yes.
Anime, whatever it may be. Video games again, right? Like, doesn't matter what it may be. People who hold, like, any kind of establishment power want to retain that power. And the moment, all these media companies are kind of the middlemen in their presentation to the general consumer, right? Like, in the past, like, it's same thing with, like, things like in video games. It used to be people would go to GameStop or Kotaku or what's another one? I don't know.
Like IGN and all that type of stuff, where they're just like, like, give me the new news, like, give me your take of what is actually good and what's actually bad. And I feel like, and with a lot of that stuff, I think it really did shift and change a lot more, especially, like, we always come back to it. It's The Last Jedi, where glowing reviews for critics, and then everyone's like, wait a second, this movie's actually really bad. You can kind of you can maybe even also see that of something like the 2016 Ghostbusters film as well, where
which
it's
are
like
also trying to push for a reboot, by the way, which is hilarious. The Paul Feig was talking about, like, like, we should release my cut of the movie. It's like, nobody wants to fucking watch your shit movie.
Yeah, pretty much. But that's what it was, where it's like, there are just certain films that will always get a glare, and I'm always very suspicious of this. Like, for example, like the Marvel films for me, like, I'm just kind of like, yeah, they're passable films, but they're always like, none of them have gone past like below like 70, and even then, like, or even 75, and even like trashy ones like Captain Marvel, for example, like, and like, I don't know, that's just me personally, but I think it's also because of, like, I guess the themes that it's trying to have, because, like, it's a little bit more lighthearted. It's not trying too much to push more thinking
that's
themes.
Like,
so they're just like, it's kind of having fun. Whilst like a DC film is like very kind of more or less serious or whatever it is. So then, you judge it in a particular way. But, basically what they're coming back to is that, like, it's this access media being like, like, we can't say anything negative about this because we'll lose exclusivity, as we've talked about before. Yeah. And that's a problem.
And we'll lose, and the main thing is, like, they'll lose prestige, right? They'll lose how they'll appear to the general population. Like, I think even on Kotaku, I think you can actually, they actually have a section now that you can request a review on a video game for, like, a certain amount of money as well. So that's how desperate they're getting, that, then for clicks. That's why you always see just volatile headlines about, I don't know, like, what was the one that happened recently? Some, like, Skyrim grandma. I don't know if you saw about that.
Skyrim, like, grandma retiring or whatever it was for a while.
Yeah, and all these outlets were just talking about, she got bullied off the internet, by all these harassers, and then it's like, no, that's not true. It's like, and even she had to go and, like, call them out on Twitter, and be like, no, this isn't true. Like, don't like, please take this off or rewrite it or whatever. And obviously, like typical things when it happens in the news, it takes what is it? It takes a lie. The lie can travel around the world before the truth can put on its boots, right? Like, by the time people are aware that like a story is false, like, it's already been spread and people aren't doing the follow up. Hell, most people don't even read past like a headline, and you can't blame it. Like, things that's how these things propagate. Like, you have like a mile long article that's full of trash, and they can just write whatever the hell they want in it, and nobody's really paying attention. And again, they want the privilege and be able to tell the general population, like, hey, you need to consume this content and get excited for the new content. Right? Like that's it. That's all the general population is, just a money sink.
And I've seen, I think I've seen it more and more. It's more obvious, I feel like, where it's like, okay, clearly you're trying to push this more harder than like anything else, or like if they don't talk about it, then clearly they have, things going on. Even you could say, even for the Last of Us 2 leaks, like mainstream articles, like I'd say something like IGN or like GameSpot have not talked about them once. Not even about like if it's good or bad or not, what it would do. I think they didn't even talk about it at all. Like,
the
or
leaks
even a
stuff?
take on it. They don't want people to know that it exists, I guess. So it's like,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
can
to
see
be
these takes, that they have of like,
yeah.
oh, we don't want to talk about it because if we do, then Naughty Dog will be pissed off at us.
Yeah, correct. Because I mean, again, like if they talk about it, like if they actually do some actual journalism, which again is like already a bit of a joke within video games, anyways, because of the way, like Kotaku and their ilk kind of run their company to the ground. Like yeah, they don't already do the proper kind of minimum journalism that's necessary. And yeah, like you said, they don't want to piss off and kick the hornet's nest, proverbially speaking. So they're just going to toe the line. They're not going to say there's a problem, even though, like, when you when you see Naughty Dog in particular, I think because a lot of YouTubers that have been reviewing stuff about The Last of Us, have been getting like copyright strikes for like using images or using like little bits of content, even though it falls under what is it,
And
fair fair
copyright
use.
law.
No, fair use. Like being
Yeah.
able to use it under fair use. Like, even though it falls under fair use, they're having their whole videos, taken down and getting strikes and stuff. But the funny thing that happened, I think, on Twitter, I think Naughty Dog had their own Twitter post, copyright striked by, or like, claimed by themselves. Like, as in, like on Twitter, when something isn't made available because it'll tell you, and that's it basically indicative that it's been like I guess
Copyright claimed.
copyright claimed and censored, so to speak, and it was done to their own post, which is
Mm.
extra hilarious. And the thing on top of that is, like, on YouTube they're removing likes to dislikes, they're removing comments. That on Twitter, Twitter introduced like a new function that prevents replies, I think, so you can't like directly. I don't use Twitter, so I only know things like
Yeah,
from
I don't use it either.
again,
Yeah.
Twitter's not very popular in Australia unless you're kind of, I guess,
Unless
like
you're
within.
semi someone,
Yeah, if you're like a famous celebrity or something
or
like
you
that, like
really
you
want to
use
follow
Twitter.
celebrity people, because it's
Yeah,
like
but it's
what,
not. But it's
I'm
like,
not going to talk to my mates on it.
yeah, I don't know, but like again, I don't use it, so I don't know. Like, it's not very popular here, but subsequently, if you want to follow entertainment news, like you said, Don, like yeah, like that's a place to be. And if you want to follow celebrities, because again, a lot of Americans use Twitter in particular. But yeah, like if you look at all their replies, like they're not letting replies happen. There's I think they've released the latest state of state of play for
Mm-hmm.
The Last of Us 2, and I think that had comments and stuff disabled. But but the thing is, like, if you just go into the gameplay footage for, I think, what is it, for like on IGN or something, you just see all the replies on that. So you
Yeah.
actually will see what the quote unquote true response of the average person is, and people aren't happy. And there's going to be a lot of trolls and stuff, but censoring it all is only bringing more. But I think that's the thing. The game is still going to sell well. So in the end, like, it's technically kind of a smart tactic. I don't know. We'll have to see once the game comes out and what people actually think of it. It would be interesting to see like if it's bad, if people give or like kind of all these kind of mainstream journalists whether they give a actual proper um like take on it rather than something that's really sanitized and non-offensive.
Well, that's the thing. I feel like I think they're pretty much set to make it feel like, oh, this is amazing, no matter what it is or the content. Because like I feel like that obviously the main reason why people are pissed off is probably more or less the story than anything else. Which
I think
it is a story driven game. Now I personally I've always had this where I'm like, Last of Us gameplay isn't really that great.
Okay.
But you know, it didn't stop the first game for having like the most amazing reviews ever. So I doubt that it's gonna be like, oh, this is a bad game.
I heard they were talking about it. It's like you can jump. What?
Yeah, or like what is it? You can swim. Or like, oh, because from last game you couldn't swim. I'm like, oh,
Oh,
cool, we solved that problem.
okay. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, it's like none of this stuff seems really breathtaking, but I mean, like the game looks really cool. Like, I mean, like from a visual perspective. So it really depends on whether it'll kind of follow through and become something that people really enjoy. And I think again, like a lot of people, it's gameplay first, then story. I'm very much like it has to be both. You know, especially because I've also been playing a game too, and or maybe you know what, it's probably like a good way to kind of segue. But before we do, I just want to just mention one more thing. With all the talks about a Snyder's cut, there's also James Gunn. Apparently wants to do like a Suicide Squad like cut because again.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're having some technical difficulties here. I have no idea where Chowders went. He disappeared. But essentially, I think what he was trying to say is that there's been talk of a David Ayer cut for the original Suicide Squad that came out in 2016. And for me, like I like, and I think we've generally had some quite problems with. Yeah, I think people didn't like the 2016 Suicide Squad as we've talked about. Like, I didn't think it was too bad, but then again, I'm a Suicide Squad guy. Like, I pretty much like anything that was Suicide Squad. Um, but like it would be interesting to see a cut of the 2016 Suicide Squad cut, because in those trailers, you saw the Joker with like the burnt face, he has a grenade. It's grounded a little bit more than like it's very aside from its mystical enchantress. So I feel like I'm all for the David Ayer cut, and I'm assuming it really depends on I guess the how the Zack Snyder Justice League cut is, because I think there's been news of what is there's Twitter, David Ayer talking about it, and then HBO Max or whatever it is, the official Twitter account's like, you gotta wait, and he's like, I'm ready. So it's kind of confirmation that like if things go well, maybe we'll see something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something that we all need to kind of look forward to in the end because, if this brings about like again look all the like I mentioned before, all these people talking about like how it's a bad idea to listen to the fans. Like one clear example of why you should is Sonic, right? Like Sonic had like literally fans of the internet fucking roasting this 3D animated fucking pathetic looking thing and made it look really good, and then and I think subsequently saved the film because the film is legitimately funny. However, if it was coming out of the mouth of some ugly I don't know, like nightmare fuel version of Sonic, I don't think it would have landed as well. You know what I mean? And I think that decision to listen to the fans ultimately resulted in people seeing it as, oh well, this is a Paramount is listening to the fans. I'm going to give it a go. That was my motivation. I was like, well, to be fair, my other motivation is I promised a friend that if they actually fixed the movie, I would go watch it, and they did, so I had to purely from an honest perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really cool, and the movie ended up being really good as well.
Yeah,
Again,
and it's also successful money wise. So
Exactly.
I feel like it does set a new precedent of like, oh hey, like, you know, fans can actually have a good impact. And of it,
Wait. Are you telling me that studios and like movies and video game developers like should make games and movies that people want to watch? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
that's pretty much it, because you know they have the money. Like, what a big shocker, right? Like,
Wow, that's
I
kind of revolutionary,
yeah,
man. Like giving
almost. It's like
people what they want. Okay.
it's like what we've been doing for years, and then like in the past like 10, 15, like 10, I would say 10 years, maybe you're at 6, 7 years that we stopped kind of doing that. Like, and like I guess once you're old enough, you see all these ebbs and flows in like entertainment, um,
Mm.
of things like you know, companies rising and falling. You know, you see a lot of this type of stuff and who they're trying to target, what they're trying to do. You know, for example, you can even see this in the gaming industry where it's like Sony during the PlayStation 3 era was just really crappy with a lot of their services and what they were doing, and like their messaging was completely off. But the messaging for PlayStation 4 was really great, and now they're like one of the best selling things out there.
Mhm.
So, but and then when it comes to movies, we've kind of seen it where people aren't interested in just bad stuff. Like I think before, you know, maybe like the mid early 2000 like tens, you know, people were just into like big explosions and stuff. That was the Michael Bay like era of action films. It didn't matter if it had content or anything, as long as there was like cool explosions, people saw it. And then nowadays, you know, you know, that's kind of disappeared. And then now, you know, I guess the trend now is just, yeah, once again, subverting expectations or doing something that, you know, maybe you know, the critics would like. They're making movies for critics and not for you know, fans, the people who actually will be making the money. So then when a lot of these things like the Ghostbusters film, you know, don't do so well, or like the Last Jedi and all the Star Wars things coming out recently aren't making the money that they should be making.
Mhm.
I guess it really just looking at the drawing board of like, who is this movie made for, and
Again,
who is actually spending the money.
I think again, like part of this is due to the fact that a lot of studios are trying to go for a, you know, like I mention it all the time on the podcast. It's like, you know, there's a four quadrants, right? It's you know, it's like you know, men and women, and then they're divided into ages, like 18 to whatever, and then you know, something at like like 30s and above or something like that. And these four quadrants of men and women is what you're trying to aim for. And so the way I see something like Ghostbusters is like, okay, this movie primarily aimed at men. We're going to try and open it up to be more accessible or more entertaining for women. But it's the only thing. But superficially, it only is Ghostbusters in name, and they try to use that in order to garner interest from you know, the other quadrants of like, you know, women aged 18 and over, and it didn't obviously attract those people, and it also didn't attract the original fans of the genre or the series either. And it's the same thing for you know, the Last Jedi and Star Wars in general. It's, well, they just rebooted Episode 4 to try and, you know, get everybody to come back, and then they just fucking threw everything out the window to subvert expectations of what we're supposed to expect. And yeah, and this is what we're dealing with. Yeah,
But yeah,
I hope it does.
but yeah, back to the egg
Yeah,
cut.
sorry.
Do you want to see it? Because I know you have a really big hate for, I guess, Suicide Squad.
Yeah, the first
Do
Suicide
you
Squad is
remember
really bad.
do you remember the year 2016 and how much hype Suicide Squad had, and like
Yeah.
Harley Quinn was fucking everywhere?
Yep. It was really good. You know, you know, one of the excuses that you know, the studios tried to put out is, oh well, they had to change the film in order to match the trailers, and that's why it was bad, which is totally incorrect because they used nothing but, well, from memory, they used nothing but like cinema like footage from the movie in order and cut that together to make it look like a cool trailer. And I still stand by it. I think if you just go off the trailers and the marketing campaign, like, you know, they use those cool graffiti and every character had their own thing and their own kind of little like I guess like, you know, thing that like trailer that explained like who they are. Even that dude who died like immediately had his own one. You know, like that's the thing that's gonna make people interested in the film. So they did, like, whoever cut those trailers deserves the raise, but the people who actually made the film, oh, I'm sorry, I guess, I don't know. Here's my kind of issue as well, right? Like Aya doesn't have like the best track record, so I don't know if his version of, or his quote unquote version, would make Suicide Squad significantly better, but I wouldn't mind seeing the stuff that was cut put back in the film in its like entirety, and give the movie make it seem more holistic, and therefore maybe like raise the level up a little bit, because again, like even what's his face, Leto, who played the Joker in it, he was quite upset because they cut out a lot of the stuff that he did, which I like. He's barely in it for the most part, so yeah, like it would have been cool to see, hey, maybe his take on the Joker wasn't as bad as him going ah ah ah, like with his hand over his mouth. I actually like the whole concept of him having a tattoo of a hand over his mouth. The damaged tattoo on his forehead, though, no, that was going too much. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I think again, we're probably not going to get a Suicide Squad like David Ayer cut, because obviously we're getting the new Suicide Squad movie coming out, and hopefully like that will lead to a few Suicide Squad movies. Like that's my fingers crossed. I hope it's good, and then what's his face will continue to direct it rather than going back to Guardians of the Galaxy, because I don't like Guardians of like if you've been following our podcast, like you'll know that I don't like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. They're not that great. Suicide Squad, though, he might be able to do a good job on it.
Yeah, it's basically his type of thing, where it's like I feel like it's his
ensemble
schlock.
movies. Yeah.
Yeah, but not only that, but like I don't know, I feel like he probably plays more better into the hard R, like very adult orientated funny stuff, because like obviously he did Tremors, which is kind of a cult classic of films, but as well he did Super, which is like a superhero film which is kind of brutal, and he actually wrote the script for the game Lollipop Chainsaw, and that's kind of like that weird funny but adult game, which is quite odd. So I feel like it's pretty much it's in his alley to do something like that. And that's why, like, for example, the 2016 Suicide Squad, the marketing of it very much looked like it was his style. But obviously it looks like from what we can see from the logo and things like that, they're going back to the old classic Suicide Squad from the 80s. So either way, regardless, more Suicide Squad is cool. It would be kind of cool to have an animated show Suicide Squad, and then you had a rotating cast in animated form. I think that could work really well.
There was the Suicide Squad movie that basically inspired Ayer's movie. That was like based in like the Arkham universe. I think it's called like Assault on Arkham. Mm-hmm. That was really cool. And then there was like the Suicide Squad Hell to Pay. That was also a movie that came out as well, which was pretty interesting too. Which, by the way, since I guess we'll talk about the movie that we watched, since we mentioned Suicide Squad Hell to Pay. We both watched Justice League Dark Apokolips War, which is very, very long title for a movie. Now that
also,
I say
Apocalypse
is
spelled like not what you think it is.
Yeah, Apocalypse. Yeah, exactly. Apocalypse based on the planet Apocalypse. It's essentially the I guess the finale movie in this kind of DC universe animated original movie universe thingamajig that they had going on. They had a bunch of animated movies in that particular series too, and they were all of like various quality as well. I think the first one was, I think probably the best animated one was probably the very first one, which was called Justice League: The Flashpoint Paradox, which is more or less a one-to-one replica of the Flashpoint Paradox comic book series. It's very, very good. Like it's very rarely would I ever tell somebody to just like to not read the comic, because you'd miss out on a lot of context. But this particular movie like adapts the comic very, very well, and then everything else is kind of like either like a loose adaptation and also very badly animated. The one thing that I kind of really liked about Justice League Dark Apokolips War is it didn't try to adapt. It borrowed a lot of concepts from the comic books, like for example, like Apokolips War is obviously supposed to be a reference to Darkseid War, which was like a comic arc in which the Justice League fight against Darkseid, and it ends with the death of Darkseid and the Justice League taking up the mantle of the new gods, right? You had, and you actually see that in the movie, for example, where Batman has to sit on the Mobius chair and he becomes like a slave of Darkseid in this movie. Well, I guess we'll go and talk about the plot of Apokolips War. Do you want to give like a summary of it?
Yeah, I guess the easiest way to explain it is it kind of starts off as saying like, hey, there's been an invasion on Earth. For Darkseid's trying to screw things over, so let's basically take the fight to him. In his home planet, Apokolips. So they gather up, I guess the world's best heroes. I guess the main focus of the story is Constantine, John Constantine. I think he obviously has a lot more of a fleshed character in this one.
Yeah, the thing is, it is called Justice League Dark, but it doesn't feel like a Justice League Dark movie per se, even though a lot of the kind of core cast initially are magic users. They eventually kind of combine and come back with like the original Justice League, so to speak. But sorry, continue.
Yeah, and then essentially what happens is that they kind of they invade Apokolips, and then we kind of flash forward into the future, and then I guess throughout time it kind of I guess it slowly reveals of kind of what happened, and it basically is the plan failed. A lot of the main superheroes have died, or they're basically changed. Like as you mentioned before,
Batman.
Batman gets converted. I guess Superman gets injected with liquidized kryptonite into his bloodstream. You have all these interesting, and I guess the real part of it is just kind of it kind of feels like it is its own end game in a sense, and it is the end chapter in the New 52 animated things where they kind of go all out, and a lot of these characters die, and then Superman comes back as well as Raven, and they're just like, hey, John Constantine, we've got a plan to kind of resolve this, and it kind of goes from there. And I guess it is quite interesting to see like where the characters happen and who died and what happened to them. I think that's also part of it as well. It almost feels like its own little Suicide Squad almost, because you saw actually these characters die.
Well, Suicide Squad is in it, and the thing is, it's the Suicide Squad that was in Suicide Squad Hell to Pay, right? Like it's those characters that come back.
Technically the same like universe or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. And like the movies, Justice League War, Son of Batman, Justice League Throne of Atlantis. All these characters kind of return and come back, and you see them. Like I totally forgot about like Teen Titans Judas contract, but like there's like a Superboy in that as well. I'm like, oh yeah, there was a Superboy in that movie, like in all that. Like it all kind of like it probably would have done me pretty well to actually like go back and watch all those films, but I feel like I won't do that. Maybe when I'm like really bored. And trust me, even in quarantine, I've been keeping busy doing other things. There's enough content out there. But the one thing I kind of liked is this wasn't a adaptation per se of it. Like for example, like I said, like it's set on they go to Apokolips at one stage, which is like kind of like Darkseid War, but they're doing their own mission there. Batman, like for example, like some characters become human robot hybrids, and that's supposed to be a reference to a series in DC called I think it's called Future's End, in which like a virus takes over and makes everybody into like a robot human hybrid. It's pretty cool. I don't know. The problem with that particular arc is it couldn't really go anywhere because it was like an end of the world scenario, and this was like a very similar thing. Like it was interesting to see like who dies, who survives. Because this isn't based on a comic. This was its own kind of unique thing, and that for me was what made this movie far more interesting, because like with the other movies they do it here and there, like in Batman Hush, like they changed who Hush was in that movie, but that didn't necessarily really change the majority of the movie for the most part, if that makes sense. Like it was mostly like playing the same way. This, like you said, felt like it had its own kind of unique ending and its own kind of reason for how things ended up the way it was. And they did end up combining all the previous elements from the previous movies in some capacity. So if you did watch like the other movies recently, you'd probably get a lot more out of it because you remember. Yeah, I thought it was really cool. The other really cool thing is Matt Ryan did the voice for Constantine in this movie, so that was really cool as well.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
it's good. It's good that he's basically he's a recurrent Constantine. Like I feel like DC knows they're like, oh shit, like he's probably the best Constantine we're gonna have, so we're gonna shove him in like everything, in a way.
Mhm.
Because it's like, he plays the character really well. I think that they were talking about, obviously the Justice League Dark or J.J. Abrams doing it or whatever it is. Everyone's hoping that it's gonna be Matt Ryan, but obviously it's probably not because they have to distance themselves. But like, perfect casting basically. And it is interesting that like the voice cast actually for this movie is actually quite interesting because they actually have some like semi-famous people. Obviously you have Rosario Dawson playing Wonder Woman.
That's true.
Yeah, so and then you got a few other ones as well. Like obviously
John DiMaggio.
yeah, John DiMaggio. I kind of like, yeah, that's John DiMaggio, isn't he? So obviously Bender. But yeah, it's very interesting that this film, because they pull nerd stops, because as was mentioned before, they kill a lot of these characters and they kill them quite brutally as well. Like it is very much an adult, like 100, like
they're not shy about it. Yeah,
it's like, wow, like that character just died. And I feel like maybe people had for reviews of this, maybe people would just be like, what the fuck, this is like, why'd you kill off my favorite character or whatever it is. But I think people just didn't understand like the context of it, I guess.
Well, here's the thing. I think this is the one thing that DC kind of maybe fumbled on with this movie, because I think if you just watch this movie, you kind of think, what the hell, like what's happening, like with that ending. And I guess we'll spoil it. Like I guess we'll just let you guys know this, like, bit of a spoiler for this movie. Essentially, like, they do manage to save the day, but like, heaps of people died. There's like what, like a billion people died, but then like the Earth is gonna get destroyed anyways because of like the kind of constant attacks and the kind of mining operation that Darkseid did on the planet. The Earth only has like maybe 3 months or something, and it's gonna get destroyed anyways. So essentially, what ends up happening is Constantine tells Barry that he needs to go back in time and like recreate Flashpoint, or cause and like change the future again. Now in the Flashpoint, it's quite interesting because in the comics, Flashpoint happens because Barry goes back in time to try and stop his arch nemesis, Zoom from, wait, sorry, not Zoom,
Is it
the Reverse
Flash?
Flash.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they kind of have the similar costumes, so that's why I always get confused between the two characters. But yes, he to stop the Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne, from killing his mother, and by stopping him from doing that, it leads to this alternate universe where like Atlantis and what is it, the Themyscira are at war, and it's leading to like a world-ending event. There's all like it's basically the world goes to shit, and essentially he has to go back in time and then stop himself from stopping. Stop himself from stopping Thawne from killing his mother. But now it's like, but because he does that, it still results in the events like still changing a little bit, and that's what leads into the New 52 and things being slightly different from what it was. Now with the events of Rebirth, which is kind of showing that, oh, there was like a mastermind behind everything. It's actually Dr. Manhattan, and it's actually really good. It actually explains away, like, it very rarely do you ever make a big fuck up, like what they did with the New 52 and some of the writing, but then be able to retroactively change it and be able to like organically weave it through everything, and it makes sense. And that's what they did with the events of Rebirth with Doomsday Clock, which, by the way, if you guys haven't read it yet, you really need to read it. It's very, very good. I think they're going to be releasing the trade paperback or whatever it is, like the old 12 issues in one big chunk. You got to read it. It's very, very good. Again, like it'll also tickle your fancy if you enjoy Watchmen and stuff like that. It'll kind of integrate
The real
together.
sequel to Watchmen.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, and so at the end of this movie, Barry just kind of runs off, and it's implied he's going to change, the past, and then you just kind of see this like wash of like kind of light kind of cover the like slowly encroach and kind of take over everything. So it's kind of implying that that universe is getting like erased, so to speak, and like or remade.
Mhm.
And so I think what that is kind of showing is, well, this is the end of these series of movies because hell, like it's really shit. And yeah, okay, look, that I'm being harsh on it. It's just because I have really high standards for DC animation. They're usually really good, but they haven't been for the past couple of movies. But I think what this kind of thing is doing is this is their last kind of hurrah. They can do whatever they want with it to make a interesting film in it. They had some interesting fights, like Trigon versus Darkseid. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that
And
was actually really cool. I wasn't expecting that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of like I'd never thought of that idea, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I guess it has a lot of fan fulfillment, or almost, because it has like these different characters kind of interacting with. It's like a whole DC universe interacting with each other.
yeah, like who, like I'm sure there's probably like something on YouTube's like who would win, like Darkseid over Trigon. Although I'm pretty sure the answer would be Darkseid, but we'll have to see. But yeah, in subsequently, I think this also opens the movies up to kind of do their own version of rebirth, like kind of, oh hey, we're gonna like reintroduce these characters, and it'll be like with better animation, and gonna have like, because I think the voice actor of Batman, I think for this movie isn't returning, so maybe they're getting a new actor to do Batman, and they're just getting new actors to do everyone. And I think like especially given like the quality of the new DC animated shows, like for example Harley Quinn, excellent animation, really funny, excellent writing. If they can do more of that, it would be great, especially in the context of movies, right? Like obviously it's expensive because it's animation. I get that, but I think that's what the people want. And if AT&T want more people to get on their what is it, HBO Max, like that's what they have to do. Even though from my understanding, I think a lot of shows, like I think a lot of people, like those online stuff that I saw, a lot of people were disappointed that certain shows went on um HBO Max, like all the Arrowverse stuff were on DC Universe and not on HBO Max, because that's probably the agreement that they have, that it's only on that and not the other thing. But
Mm-hmm.
I think at this stage they have to combine the two, man. You know what I mean? Like for people to actually
Yeah, because the
not
only
like.
only show, as far as I know, that is crossed over is literally Doom Patrol, but Titans isn't there. I think maybe
Mm,
Swamp Thing is there. I'm not quite sure on that one. But yeah, I think maybe at some point. I think give it a few months, maybe to a year. We'll see how HBO Max goes. And then they'll be
dude,
like, look,
they have to see
let's do it.
how DC Universe goes. I don't know how popular that is.
Yeah,
Um,
because I feel like, yeah, obviously DC Universe is a very niche thing. Like
yeah.
essentially that is, if like instead of Disney Plus, Marvel is like they're just like, oh, we're gonna do Marvel Access or whatever it is, and it just has all the Marvel movies, all the Marvel TV shows, and and then like the comic books, and that's it. Like how much like that's quite a bit of content, but like how much it doesn't have anything else but that particular I guess IP. So then it kind of suffers in itself, where it's like it always has to you have to rely on backlog of stuff.
Mhm.
From what I've heard with the DC app, it's good in the sense of like you can access like digital comics. I think like a lot of or like these older cartoons that like you can't find anywhere else. I feel like
Mhm.
that's its kind of niche. But still, it would never have the mass appeal of something like a Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like in they have to kind of combine everything together. I think like if they do something like put Crunchyroll, put HBO, put DC Universe, put it all together in a HBO Max package, man, that would be not only value, like it'd be like consumer friendly, but it'll just be like a good business move. But again, I'm not a business guy. I don't know all the kind of money exchanging hands kind and contract stuff. Like maybe like they can't do that because of I don't know whatever deal they made from years ago. But I think that's the direction that they should aim to go to, if they want a successful I guess streaming
Well, they
platform to
can.
rival
Yeah.
something like Netflix or Disney Plus.
And that's the thing. They could easily put all the, I guess, DC animated movies on there. As we kind of talked about, it's the whole universe. It'd be really cool to have all of them there. Not like every single one that they've kind of created. And that would be really interesting as well, because you have all that content there. And it looks like, obviously, going back to Apokolips War, it does seem that, like, essentially they'll never stop doing the animated shows. So obviously the new animated movies, whatever they may be, they're obviously going to set into like what the new current comics are. So maybe we'll see a Dark Knight's Metal or a White Knight animated into a
maybe
animated form.
Maybe I'd be far more interested to see how that looks like than, I don't know, more poorly animated shit. That's what I got to say. But yeah, I personally really like all things aside, I think like the movie, Justice League Dark, Apokolips War, a lot of the voice acting's pretty good. Even I think like Damian Wayne, who I didn't like in the previous movies, was still at least tolerable in this movie. And yeah, like I think it's still worth the watch, especially if you like that, like those films. If you enjoy those animated films, you definitely enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, and it's like I think I'm less harsh on it. Like, I think it's a pretty solid film. It is kind of its finale. It is interesting also as well to kind of see where the characters, I get character fulfillment. And I guess it gives it some, like, also wrapping up with like basically anything with John Constantine in it is it's a fun time for me. So yeah, I enjoyed the film. So yeah, that's kind of our review of Justice League Apokolips War. Something that what I've actually been doing is during this quarantine type time, I've kind of been catching up on shows that I either have kind of watched or have one more season of or something like that. And I've done that with Marvel's Runaways. And reviewing the third season, because the third season came out I think like December last year in 2019. And I just never got time to go around to it. I knew it was the last season. Basically around that time, around December, like October, that's when all the news of Daredevil being cancelled, Punisher, basically all the Marvel TV shows being cancelled. So obviously I kind of knew from the get-go this was going to be cancelled, because no one really talks about the Marvel's Runaways, and I guess it's semi-spin-off Cloak and Dagger, which got 2 seasons as well.
Oh God.
Yeah, I know.
Whatever happened to?
Yeah.
What happened to that show?
I did watch the first season. I thought it was kind of whatever, and apparently it got improved on the second season, but it got cancelled. And funny thing is, those characters actually cross over in one of the episodes in this season.
Of course they do.
Yeah. So I feel like obviously it's like a semi-different branch of like Marvel and what it tried to do. And I guess the Runaway story, which is I guess in a general recap, is that they the kids find out that their parents are part of this worshipping cult for like more or less aliens, extra dimensional aliens, and there's all this other stuff going around. So basically just don't trust their parents, and they're just on the run, hence then Runaways. And this is kind of a review of the third season. I tried to jump in and I forgot so many things. It only really took about 2 episodes to remember what happened, because a lot of things I think happened in kind of season 2. But essentially the third season, I would say in general isn't probably the best season that it had. I still think I think the best season's maybe season 2, because I think a lot of people had criticisms of season 1 because it's called the Runaways, but they didn't run away at that point yet. I think obviously they played the card of, we're going to introduce these characters, we're going to slowly build up to the point of when we're actually going to be part of the show, and kind of go from that way. So that's why season 2 is still the best at this show, but season 3, I guess there's a lot more involved. So in a general recap is that these aliens have kind of inhabited the parents' body, and they're still trying to awaken the final power of them. And these kids are basically at odds with their parents, who have all the money and resources in the world, and obviously they kind of fight back. An interesting part of it is that the villain of this season is she's actually played by Elizabeth Hurley, out of all people, because for some reason Elizabeth Hurley is in like literally nothing. And she plays one of an actual X-Men character. I think it's like the Sorceress. I don't remember like her exact X-Men name. They just basically called her Morgan in the show. Um, and she's basically the sorceress inside the staff that Nico uses. Because Nico has a sorcerer's wand, more or less, a staff that has all these magical powers. And it's basically the struggle between Nico and awakening the powers and not using them. And there's all this other extra stuff going on. It's very hard to explain when you don't have the context to it.
Yeah, but I kind of get it. Like, essentially, they are trying to, like, I guess, level up these characters, like in the last season, right?
And I think it ends really in general. Like I think it pretty much it puts it in a way where, like, I'm not mad if this was the final season, which it is. Like yeah,
Which it is.
which it is. Like, I think where the character arcs are, they do really well of, like, the powers. For example, they kind of mention that one of the characters, for example, they invent time travel in their universe. So then there's time travel involved in probably like the last 2 to 3 episodes. And that's quite interesting. And it did kind of maybe tease like a season 4 or what it could have been. But I think it is continue on in comic book form. So you can technically finish the story kind of there. But but I think it does it in such a way where it is kind of a good final hurrah for the Runaways team. I in general, I always really like the TV show and the chemistry of the cast. They do really well of who these characters are. It is very much teen drama, but as well as we're gonna take care of these evil people. So you had a lot of the people like Alex and Carolina talking to each other, and Gert having a relationship with Chase. So there's all this kind of teen drama along with it as well. But overall, I do like the season. It was an okay, solid season. Nothing too bad. Obviously, like I mentioned before, it's probably not the best season. As, like, I think the plot line between, like, oh yeah, aliens taking over the parent's body was kind of whatever. I was more interested in Elizabeth Hurley's character being the sorceress that's gonna more or less take over the world with these actually really funny. They it's kind of like a stolen plot from Kingsman, the first Kingsman film, where, like, the sorceress has these phones that basically control whatever the person does. It gets them really angry. So it's basically like, oh, you took the plot from Kingsman, which, by the way, really love that film. So I don't care if you stole it; it's okay by me. But yeah, like I thought I think overall, if we're gonna look at retrospective as this as a whole series, I honestly think it's okay giving it a watch. It's not the era of Marvel TV in a sense of it's not Daredevil, it's not Jessica Jones the first season. It's more Jessica Jones second season type of thing. I'd put it more in that kind of camp. But I think more or less I enjoyed it more just with the characters and how they're written and in their interaction more than anything else. So I think during this quarantine season, I think maybe try some random Marvel TV shows that you've never heard about. Like The Runaways, which never got its due. I personally think. Yeah. So, but, like, there's a fan base, and there is the comic book, which I think is probably better, but that's just my interpretation. So that's kind of my review of The Runaways. Have you had any interest in watching these shows, or, like, Cloak and Dagger or anything like that?
So here's the thing. With X-Men, I only really care about, like, the core X-Men characters. I don't really care about these other kind of up and coming characters, because they don't really, like, I don't really know, like, I don't, like, either I didn't grow up with them or I never read their comic. Like, again, X-Men's pretty much like single-handedly like were the interesting characters of the Marvel universe, because you could, like, so much so that you could basically, like, people were okay with having them in their own cinematic universe because they just had their own kind of shit going on in their sector, and it almost, like, kind of made you question, like, like, why wouldn't the Avengers interact with X-Men? And then, well, they did have an event semi recently. But yeah, like, it's one of those things where the characters that aren't, like, the core characters, like Wolverine, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Storm, is it Frost? Emma Frost, Magneto. Like, these, if it's not about these characters, I kind of don't care. And usually they seem like really gimmicky. The characters that usually like these other characters, but again, it really comes from the fact that I haven't read these comics.
Mhm.
I tried to, I read a bunch of the X-Men comics that came out. They tried to do like a semi kind of reboot of like the X-Men characters, like, oh, they're set on like, they're all kind of coming together and making a utopia on this island. It's actually like conceptually it's very, very interesting. However, like I tried to read some of the, like, they finished, I think it's like the Children of X and something of X or something like that, those series. And then they started to go with, okay, now we're doing like X-Men comics, and then we're also doing X-Force, and then we're doing the Marauders, and then they had the New Mutants. Now, originally I was like, oh, okay, I'll check out the New Mutants, and then, oh, suddenly they're in space and they're fighting random aliens, and it's like, okay, I have no idea who, like, one, these aliens are, and two, who like these characters that it's centered around are. Like they reference them in the other comics, and I'm just like, okay, like, I don't mind if they're there. I just don't know anything about it. But again, I think like maybe for people who do follow those characters, or maybe if like maybe I just didn't like the um I guess I didn't like the kind of the genre shift, right? From it being, hey, like we're focusing on mutants and mutant kind doing their cool shit to, oh, suddenly we're off in space and it's now a sci-fi thing. I think that was my problem with it. Whereas, I've been reading the Marauders. It's basically Kitty Pryde is now like the captain of her own ship, and they're trying to save mutants who aren't able to get to the kind of Krakoa, which is like the mutant utopia that they're trying to build.
Mhm.
So that's like her thing, and like because typically, like usually, the Marauders are technically kind of like the bad mutants. Like they're usually like a gang of like bad mutants. But now this is like a kind of like a sanctioned ship called the and they're known a group called the Marauders, and they're kind of doing their own thing, and that's interesting because at least like not all the characters I'm familiar with, but at least it's like what they sometimes did with like Marvel comics back in the day, where it was like, oh, they'll have Wolverine, and then everybody else is like either nobodies or like like B-list characters, and then Wolverine disappears later on. They do that in like DC as well with Batman. It's like, oh, Batman and the Outsiders, but then it's like centered around the Outsiders, and Batman's only kind of in it here and there, right? Like it's trying to get people to read it by giving them like a bit of a nugget of things that people like. And I
Yeah.
think that's ultimately it. I'm not familiar with the characters like in Runaway, like all the characters. Like what are their? Can you tell me any of their like quote unquote superhero names, or do they not use them in the show?
They're not. It's not. Gert has a telepathic power to a T-Rex that kind of protects her. Nico has as I mentioned, the staff that can kind of do these kind of like telekinesis powers. The other characters kind of have like these kind of gauntlets that kind of, he's kind of like the inventor. So he can make these gadgets that do stuff. And obviously we've got the hacker type character. So it's like and then the other character just has some super strength. When they got basically experimented on when they were a kid. But it's nothing too like superhero per se. And like they don't have costumes or anything. But
Well,
yeah,
the costumes I didn't really expect, but like at least they don't go. I don't know, because it's like maybe if I knew some of the characters that might be make me interested, but like again, the show didn't, like all these other kind of shows that they all seem kind of bootleg, and I think even you admittedly, like you referred to them as what, Jessica Jones season 2, right?
yeah,
um
where they're not prestige television, but like it's passable television.
yeah, well, I don't know, I didn't
Well,
necessarily
Jessica
consider
Jones
it.
season 2 was probably pretty bad, like a bad analogy because that was actually really bad, but still.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, that's what I mean.
But like, yeah,
But
that's the thing. I liked the show enough to watch it for 3 seasons.
mhm.
And yeah, at the end, as I mentioned before, it's more about the character development that I did like. It's like the character moments, because and sometimes in shows where you're just kind of like it's going through the motions, but you're like, you know what, I like the characters and the characters' interaction. I want to see more in that world, even if it's bad. That's what I kind of got from kind of this show, is that it may not be the premiere television, but it's got some good characters, and good moments with them.
hmm Yeah, I don't know. I think for me it really came down to the fact that Marvel doesn't really like now all Marvel
Mhm.
TV that comes out now will have like the Marvel seal of approval because it'll generally be coming out on their Disney Plus platform, right? So you're at least they kind of want the Disney quality attached to it. I think that's the reason why we're seeing a lot of shows ending. Like same thing with like the like things in like the CW universe, right? Like I think all that's going to be wrapping up relatively soon because DC wants to do everything in house within their own like sphere of things, and and I think that's going to be far more beneficial because we're going to get high quality television, but whether or not people actually watch it, that's like another thing. But I'd rather like a high quality version of the Runaways being done by Marvel as opposed to something like a Gotham done by Fox.
Mhm.
Like there's always this level of quality that kind of drops when you don't give it to, I guess, like people who actually care about the IP. Um, and I think ultimately, it's finished, but hopefully that means there be opening up for new things in the future. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most, like what the next generation of superhero TV will be like. And if it's going to be like this high production television that people are going to be consuming through their streaming services, or whether it won't be the case. Because like we've talked about it before, like Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, all those things are not profitable at the moment. It takes a couple of years for those things to be profitable,
Mhm.
because that's when they're waiting for a consumer base to build on it.
Yeah,
And
like
it's also
I
the
feel like yeah, with something like Netflix, for example, it really didn't hit its stride. Really, like its streaming part of it really didn't hit its stride until like I would say the first season of Stranger Things kind of hit, and that was like in 2014. I would say like before then,
yeah.
Netflix was kind of out. It had some shows like Bloodline and like Marco Polo, House of Cards, but it never really got its full like
It
mainstream
didn't have like
attention.
yeah, it didn't have a worldwide appeal because like people obviously used it in America, for example. But it didn't start like hitting everywhere, being like, oh, you gotta watch this thing. The moment they started like rolling it out everywhere, like you said, with something with interesting stuff in original TV, like Stranger Things, and because it represented oh hey, this is where everybody can syndicate their TV shows and not have to watch ads on cable TV or network TV, right? That's the main appeal of something like Netflix. But now everybody's trying to do their own thing and have their own show. But when you kind of take it all apart, it takes away the value and the convenience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing, it decreases the value of Netflix as well, which is why Netflix is trying to go into making a lot of more original content. Like the Avatar, The Last Airbender is like the most streamed thing on Netflix. Like it's like hella high streaming numbers, right? And Netflix is doing their own streaming. Are they doing a live action version of Avatar: The Last Airbender, or it's like in the
Yeah, they're
works?
doing that. They're doing like the One Piece one as well. So it's like clearly they're just taking that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So they're kind of looking at what they can do with the content there, that they don't like. They obviously don't quote unquote have rights to, but they're going to be trying to use that in order to um, justify people to come back and consume whatever content that they have and justify the what. Like it's like how much is Netflix now? Like 20 here in Australia.
Is it like yeah? If I think if you're
17.
paying for the HD the pack, I think yeah,
Yeah, like I'm thinking like the mid pack, right? Like that's the
yeah,
HD. Yeah, like that's like probably the pack that's probably what the average person usually gets on it. Like yeah, it's like 18 $19. It's like that's only going to go up in the future. That used to be like way cheaper here. It used to be way cheaper in America, and they're going to incrementally over time increase how much it costs until it gets to the point that it's profit viable. And by then, there's going to be like a consumer base that's there, and they're going to have a lot of original TV, and it's going to justify dropping like $20 million an episode. I forgot how many like Mandalorian was like really expensive, right? Like per
yeah.
episode, it was
It
like
would
a
like
couple
in
of
general
million.
would have been.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think that's a good thing because in the end, that's what's going to get people coming to watch these shows. Like that's why, like, you know, the Snyder Cut is a good thing for things going forward. People want to watch shows that you know, people have an interest in, and we're going to be consuming content that is going to be in a different way too. Like movies are coming out in like a digital format now. Like, you know, like we mentioned with what is it, the Trolls movie that did really well. You know, Sonic like went from cinemas straight into like a digital format really quickly and watching it online. And also I think Scoob, which was supposed to come out in cinemas, now just went digital. And I'm not really too sure. How's that? Do you know? You've watched that movie recently, right?
Yes. Yep.
And you're going to give us a review on it in just a second. But do you know anything about like how that movie did from a profit perspective?
I think it has done pretty well. I think from what I've heard is it's gained some success, in its how it's made its money. It's really interesting how they are phrased, just purely because of like obviously there's no like box office, so we don't know the critical reception unless like there's video on demand sales, and apparently you know it has done pretty well. I think I'm reading here it made 40 million over its first 3 days, which you know I think. And currently it remains the top rental film in its second weekend, so it is a relatively new film, and I think that's pretty good. It basically means that it's the top movie the second week in its row, I guess, in comparison if it was released in the movies, which is pretty good. It is quite interesting as well how the both films that have released kind of video on demand access have been both animated film kid films. That could be very interesting part of it, but yeah, you know, I think I'm assuming it's doing really well so far.
Yeah, well, that's good because I actually totally forgot that it was the case because I probably need to check it out and see, like, you know, how you know, if it's any good. I actually really liked the Scooby Doo series. It was like a animated cartoon series. There's like a ton, but there was like a really good one that I liked. Like animation was cool, and it wasn't like a typical, like, you know, episode of Scooby Doo. It was like, you know, the character, there was like a character arc and you know, like a story arc that they were following as well. But I forget what that one's called. But yeah, Scoob, tell us the plot to Scoob.
Yeah, good old Scoob. Essentially it's just a plot between essentially they're like okay, with the Scooby-Doo plot it's very hard to like, because there's obviously the mystery, but you know, essentially and it does some really interesting essentially there's Dick Dastardly, which is also another Hanna-Barbera cartoon villain. He's there to chase the Scooby Gang because Scoob, like Scooby-Doo, is actually a descendant you know, character you know, of his family, and he's kind of the key to uncover these hidden treasures. And that's kind of the thing. So essentially, the Dick Dastardly character steals Scooby-Doo, and the gang needs to, I guess, to find Scooby-Doo. But it does some very interesting things, I guess, with its plot. Obviously, the main cast is kind of split. So then you do have Shaggy and Scoob kind of together as they do, and then you've got the rest of the cast, which is like Velma, Daphne, you know, and Fred kind of being by themselves and then trying to solve out what happened, because essentially what happens is they get kidnapped and the group need to find them. But on top of this, we've also got a kind of plot line, a subplot line that also relates to Scooby-Doo, where there's these characters which I don't know of, and they're the what do you call them? The Blue Falcon. I don't know if that's also a Hanna-Barbera cartoon character. But the Blue Falcon's there. It's like a random like subplot of like the Blue Falcon.
Yeah, it kind of seems like a kind of like a parody of like Batman, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm not quite sure of my Hanna-Barbera lore, I guess. But
Oh,
he's
neither. I'm not.
yeah, he's there. He's played by Mark Wahlberg, and you know, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy stumble upon them, and they're just like, hey, you know, we need your help to you know, to solve crimes and things like that. And yeah, and then it kind of goes on that tangent. So that's why I feel like this film is kind of very weird. It almost sounds like they're kind of setting up their own I guess Hanna-Barbera universe, because on top of not only Dick Dastardly and of course this Blue Falcon character, but they've also got I think the caveman like I don't know the exact name of the character, but you know, like I think if you've ever watched those Hanna-Barbera characters,
Fred Flintstone.
no, it's another caveman where he's like, I don't know, he's got really long hair. Like if I've seen that character before. I don't know what it is, but essentially it's a character. I'm looking up now. Captain Caveman. Never heard of the character, but Captain Caveman is also in this movie. So I feel like it's kind of like, as I mentioned before, it's starting. It's like shared universe of Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and this is kind of the start of it. And they kind of they launched it in kind of like a Scooby-Doo universe, which
okay.
Yeah, which I think is a novel idea, which I personally think is fine. There's probably some purists that are just like, no, they can't be crossing over, whatever. But I'm fine with that. I think that overall the mystery is quite interesting. Because I think there's a lot of plot lines of like essentially the main characters is you know the Scooby Gang wants to go pro. You know, they want to get deals and you know, kind of sell out in a way. And then for some reason, Simon Cowell comes in, which is really weird to see a weird animated version of Simon Cowell in the film. He comes in playing himself, and he's like, "Hey, you know what? You need to hit it to the big time. You need to get rid of Scooby Doo and Shaggy." And you know that's why they kind of split off in the group.
Ah, okay.
Fair enough. And they kind of do their own things until they match up back in the end. Whilst you know the Scooby Gang needs to you know be like, "Oh no, we found out that Scooby's the key, and we need to help him out." And there's all this other stuff going on. In general, I don't mind the movie. I think the movie does some really good stuff in the first probably like 20 minutes, where you know I guess it's like I would say probably the best like the first type origin story of the Scooby Gang. So it has kind of Shaggy and Scooby Doo when they were like really young.
We first meet, yeah. I think we said that in the trailers, yeah.
So you get that, which is kind of cute. Kind of like understands the kind of their bond relationships together. And then you also get them obviously meeting the group and how they are together and like, you know, playing on their strengths. I guess and I guess in general it does play to its core, which is like it's Scooby-Doo. Like Scooby-Doo in general is very formulaic. I people could say it's too formulaic because it's kind of the same kind of plot line. Like, you know, someone has a mystery, someone tells them about this mystery that you've never heard of before. They you know investigate the mystery. They split off. Bad things happen. You know, most of the time Shaggy finds some sort of like lever, it solves the mystery type of thing, and then Velma comes in. It's like, hey, let's find out who it is, and then it's the same person who told them about the mystery.
Yeah, classic. Wow, spoilers.
Yeah, I know, right? But the thing is, at least with this movie, I think it very much is self-aware of this. And it does pull a few jokes on it sometime. For example, like where when Shaggy and Scooby are away, and then you know like Velma and the rest of the group are in prison. You know, Daphne kind of like has a little joke that kind of says, "Oh yeah, you know, by this time, if Shaggy was here, he'd find like a random like hidden passageway somewhere." But I think it understands where it kind of comes from, and it's not really a spoiler, but it also plays on the also the trick of the mask reveal, which I did like, because obviously that's such a thing of like, oh, it's a mask all along. Like I feel like it does a really cool joke on it. So like and I think it kind of is this kind of new era of Scooby-Doo where it's kind of self-aware of its formulaic nature and tries to do something slightly different to it. There's a lot of other stuff as well, which I don't think really works too well. For example, like the Blue Falcon stuff. You know, there's a whole subplot of him, and you know, trying to be, you know, work up to like, you know, his dad, which has retired, and now the new Blue Falcon's there, and he's gonna, you know, he's a coward. He needs to, you know, step up his game, and you know, yeah, that stuff is kind of very whatever. And probably
yeah,
can
like
be...
you wanted more Scooby and less this guy. Is that basically it?
More or less, and I feel like that's the sentiment for a lot of people of this film, where people are just saying it's an okay Scooby ride. However, there's all this other world building that's kind of going on that maybe doesn't fit it. But I still applaud the attempt. And it, as mentioned before, it seems to be doing pretty well. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a sequel to the Scooby-Doo animated movie. But as well as maybe at some point they're gonna be launching like a, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they do a Flintstones one or like Jetsons one, because you know I think people, it still has some brand recognition. But I think Scooby-Doo has the most, I would say.
Yeah, I mean it makes complete sense that they'd want to kind of expand upon all that too, because again, like Flintstones and Jetsons are very popular characters too, and this might be like the like dipping the toes to see whether people enjoy this kind of content, and maybe they might make more in the future.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not really probably the best person to talk about Scooby-Doo because I'm not really a purist. Like I've only really watched the live action films and probably like the cartoon when I was like a little kid a few times. I don't really remember them, but like I enjoyed my time with it. It's like I don't really see anything too wrong about it. I guess I am a little bit maybe pissed off on certain things in the sense of like Fred, for example, gets nothing to do in this film. Which I guess in the original like Scooby-Doo cartoons and things like that, he's kind of like the leader, and he's like, you go here, you go there. He doesn't really do anything but being like basically a goofball that doesn't understand things. He's being played by Zac Efron, which is I guess it's perfect casting for him. But yeah, it's kind of like they've framed it in such a way where it's like he's just whatever. And even with Daphne doesn't really have any character either. I feel like they just need to be. Obviously, this film more focuses about Scooby-Doo and Shaggy. That's kind of like the main character arcs and the main characters of this movie. So hopefully in future sequels they flesh out more about these characters of like Velma and Fred and things like that. I feel like that was kind of the missed opportunity of this film, but I think it's an okay film. Definitely if you wanted for kids, definitely watch. They'll probably really love this, especially since it's 3D animated. But I have heard that the direct to DVD animated Scooby-Doo films are pretty good, which I've never watched, but I've heard like they've come out consistently and they're pretty good apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing like the odd one here and there, like maybe they'll be on TV and stuff. And yeah, I mean, they're very formulaic, but like I like him. But I mean, I also grew up like kind of watching like random Scooby-Doo episodes, so I'm a bit like primed to enjoy that kind of I guess expectations as films place on you.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I don't really have past lore about Scooby-Doo, so I probably am not probably the best like person, but in an outside person looking in, this is just an average okay animated film. It has some modern like stuff going on. It has animated, it's 3D animated, and it's got like basically jokes to keep you entertained. But at least I congratulate the film for at least not putting like really stupid like like farting humor or whatever, like low IQ humor. I'm at least happy that they didn't do that just to be like, oh, we're gonna appeal to the kids. So for that, I applaud that as well. So I think I think more or less give it a watch. And it could be something that spawns into something very different in the future. And it could spawn a franchise, but who knows for that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's basically us this week. Remember, you can always listen to us on Spotify, iTunes, Libsyn, and our YouTube channel where we stream called Marketing Movies. So until next time, we're still not sure if Henry Cavill is still Superman, but we'll keep you updated. So until next time, see ya.